We are now going to study the last Mishnah in Masechet Beitza, which deals with Muktzah, and that's on the bottom of Daf Mem Amud Aleph. Ein machkin vein chochatim es hamidbarios, avol mashkin v'shochatin es habaisos. There are two categories of animals. Let's start with the second category. It was called baisos. These are domesticated animals, and they go out to pasture, and then they return, and you can anticipate their return within a very short period of time. That's called baisos. Midbarios are animals that you let out to go in the far pasture land, and he doesn't know exactly when they're going to come back. In the case of midbarios, he cannot anticipate the return of the animal within a reasonable time, as we'll soon see. And therefore, he didn't have das for this animal to shecht it on Yontiv, and now it becomes muktzah. In the case of baisos, however, since he anticipates that the animal will come back within a short period of time, it's as if he prepared them for Yontiv, and therefore he's allowed to shecht them. There's no isum muktzah, it's muchan. Elu baisos halonos be'ir. The animal will come back to rest within the bounds of the city, whereas midbarios, lonos bi afar, they go outside of the city limits, they find themselves grazing land, and that's where they rest up, and you don't know when they're going to come back, and therefore you're not making them going into Yont. If you're talking about baisos, these are your animals in your backyard, then you can shecht them. I didn't need the Mishnah to tell me you're allowed to give them something to drink and you're allowed to shecht them. That's pshita. For sure, there's no isa to be mashke on Yontiv Behema. And the Gemara says, milsagav urche kamashke. Sometimes the Mishnah wants to tell you something that has nothing to do with halacha. It's just a good piece of advice. For someone who's shechting an animal, the Mishnah implies a good piece of advice. The lishki inish behem tovahado lishko. That before he shechts the animal, he should give the animal to drink, because mishum sircha demashcha. What happens is the outer skin, the hide of the animal, is very much attached to the flesh of the animal, and it's going to be very challenging to remove the to be mafshit, to skin the animal, take off the hearts. However, if you give the animal to drink, then somehow the moisture that is generated by the animal drinking will soften up the hide and make it easier for you to strip off the heart. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Beitza, Elu hein midbarios v'elu hein baisos. Again, the Beitza is recording the machlokes between the Chacham, between the Tanakama and Rebbe. Rebbe's opinion did not appear explicitly in the Mishnah. It appears here for the first time in the Beitza. The Tanakama says, Eilein baisos, Eilein midbarios, Eilein baisos, midbarios, kol sheyotzis b'Pesach. The animal is let out into the pasture land, Pesach time, when there's a lot of vegetation growing, Veros b'Efer, and they graze in the land, the grazing land that's outside the city. V'nechnasos, when do they return to the city? B'Revia Rishon, which means a full half a year later when the rains start falling. It's called, I always forget the different, I think it's called the autumnal, either equinox, or let's see what he calls it in English here. Second, get the right page here. Remember what it's called, the Reviri Shona? Right. I always review your astronomy here for Daf Yomi for sure. He says because of the adhesion of the hide to the animal, if one waters this animal before it's slaughtered, it becomes easier to skin it later on. Okay, that we got right. And now we have V'ein nichnasos Bervia Rishon. Let's see, first rains. Okay, that we said. 35.
Rains in Cheshvan.
Month of Chesh. He doesn't tell you. Okay, I think it's called the autumnal equinox. Anyway, so that's when they come back in during the rainy season. I guess they want the shelter that the island will offer. So those are called midbarios, and they're muktzah according to the Tanakh. We'll see that Rebbe is going to reject this. They come back that same night from the grazing area that's outside the tchum, and they come into the tchum. So you anticipate their arrival, their return, and therefore they're not muktzah. Rebbe Omer elu v'elu baisel. Even in the case of an animal that leaves for 6 months until it comes back at the beginning of the rainy season, that's also something you can anticipate, and it's muchan. So elu ein midbar. So what, according to Rebbe, is the midbarios? Kol sheyotzos v'ros b'yefer ve'nichnasim li'yishuv lo b'mos hachama v'lo b'mos hakshama. You have animals that you send them out to the, to the far off, distant places, and they won't come back even during the rainy season. So you have no clue when they'll come back. Now, what we're going to be medayik from Rebbe is that Rebbe is agreeing in principle to muktzah, but he says that there's no muktzah unless the animal will not return during the winter. That was a double negative. But in other words, if the animal will return from the rainy seasons, it's not muktzah. But if he won't return, then it is muktzah. So the Gemara says, "Umi yislei the Rebbe muktzah." What you're telling me is that Rebbe actually accepted the principle of muktzah, and that's the shita Rabbi Shimon against Rabbi Yehuda. And yet, Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe, the son, Rabbi Shimon asked his father Rebbe, "What's the status, according to Rabbi Shimon, of patzile tomorrow?" These are dates that were packaged for sale. He had no intention going into Shabbos or Yontif of eating from these dates. But what happened is he ran out of dates. And he wanted to go into his storage and take the dates out of his storage. What would you say about that? Rabbi Shimon Mao, according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is clearly a case of muktzah, because he didn't anticipate taking these dates into his house for eating purposes. He designated them and packaged them for the shuk, for the marketplace. But according to Rabbi Shimon, who rejects muktzah, and he holds it's mutter, is it mutter to eat from these dates, or maybe they are muktzah. Amalei, and Rebbe responds to his son Rabbi Shimon, ein muktzah le Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon rejects muktzah. Ella, and here we turn to the Achmemah Mitbeis. The only time that Rebbe says that Reb Shimon accepts muktzah is grogos v'tzimukim bilvad, when he takes the grapes and he puts it up on the roof of his house to bake in the sun, to make raisins out of grapes. And in the middle, there's going to be a period of time in which the grapes are inedible, they're very bitter. And that's called, in the language of Reb Shimon, maktzah lemi yadayim. He explicitly took something and he pushed it out of his realm, out of his domain. And that's when there's muktzah. So if that be the case, if Reb Shimon was interpreted by Rebbe, it's logical to assume that Rebbe accepted the view of Reb Shimon, which means that he rejected muktzah. And if he rejected muktzah, then why is he telling me in the case of an animal that the animal is muktzah if I don't know, I can't anticipate when it's going to return? And the Gemara offers 3 answers. First answer, Ibais ema hani nami kagrogas vitzimukim dam. The very moment that he sends out his animal, knowing full well that the animal, we can't anticipate when the animal is going to return, that's parallel and analogous to the case where he puts his grapes up on the top of the roof. Ibais ema. Another option is lidvarav to Rabbi Shimon Kamar le v'leilo spirle. It's true that Rabbi Shimon asked his father, Rebbe, what would Rabbi Shimon paskin in this case of Hatzile Bitamra? But Rebbe was just answering, I'll tell you what I think Reb Shimon would say in that case. There's no mukta, but I myself agree and accept the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that there is mukta. And therefore, in the case of midbarios, there is mukta. By saying the third answer, Divrayim de Rabbanan Kamalu. Rebbe was talking to the Rabbanan. He was saying, on your turf, Livi, be according to me, I hold like Reb Shimon ain't mukta. And therefore, the whole issue of midbarios is totally irrelevant. Any animal that you somehow shows up, you can check it on Yom Tov. But Liditchu, you hold from mukta, but Odu Limias, you should in any event concede that Heicha the Yotzos Veroals Bepesach, and if Nasos Berevia Shona, that I can tell and determine from the get-go that the animal is going to return on such and such a date. He's the Baisio. These are prepared. He has hachana. He has doubts that they make, especially when we get closer to to this period of time of around Cheshvan or Sukkot time. And the Rabbanan responded, no, I disagree with you. I hold that if they're being sent out for such a long period of time and we have to wait until the rains come, he's Mesiach Das, and it is Mukta. Hadron Alechem Ashilin, Veslika, Masechet, Beitza. Let's just begin the Mishnah in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, which we'll pick up in Mirza Hashem tomorrow. Arba Roshei Shonim. There are 4 different categories of Rosh Hashanah. Echad v'Nisan, Rosh Hashanah l'Melachim, u'l'Regalim, v'Echad v'Elul, Rosh Hashanah l'Maser, b'Hema, v'Lazar Shimon Omer v'Echad v'Tishrei, v'Echad v'Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah l'Shanim, l'Shvitim, v'Yovlos, l'Netia, u'li'Yerakos, v'Echad v'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah l'Ilan, Kedir Beit Shammai, Beisil Omrim, v'Chamisha Asar Bo. With Hashem, we'll study this Mishnah in depth tomorrow. Mazel tov for completing the set.